Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. And again, as our special guest, we have one of the fan favorites, Eric Levine, distinguished lawyer, political commentator, host to some of the most important public policy and political figures in the country at his series of seminars. Eric, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be here. Appreciate it.
So, the way I wanted to do this is I want to talk about what I consider the large theme, and then we can focus how this works. The large theme to me, as I was sitting down and working out notes with you gentlemen, is this. The country is now facing a clear and present danger, and we have to take it seriously, that the United States is under attack both externally and internally. And I want to talk about the various issues that arise from that perspective. Obviously, we can't talk about everything in one show, and obviously we'll be talking about these topics again in the future. But I want to start off by saying I think this is very, very serious. I think the United States has lost its focus. It's lost its sense of place in the world. It doesn't know where it should be going under the leadership or the lack of leadership of the Biden administration. There really are external threats out there that we have to confront. There really are internal threats that we have to confront. And the best example of an external threat, which was mishandled in my humble opinion, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Eric and Jesse, is a whole situation with the not-so-beautiful balloon that Jesse and I were talking about last week. So, Jesse, why don't you start the discussion about what you think about what's going on with this issue about the balloons?
Well, I think it just, number one, I believe that this is just a greater, and this is just one person's humble opinion, but I believe it's a greater testing of American military positioning, thought process, finding out where we have in our gut. I think that we have a number of different state actors, primarily China, and we still don't know where the three other balloons or UFOs or unidentified aviation phenomenons, whatever they're calling it now, were or what their source were. But sorry about that. What we do know is that we need to take action against those things. Now, I'm not sure why there's a rash of these things. People say that maybe we're adjusting our radars. I'm not sure. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that this is a greater situation of where we as a nation are being tested economically. I think we're being tested socially in our streets and with groups like Antifa. And I think now we're being tested on a national security and on a military point of view. I believe this is a lot, especially the balloon that we should never have allowed to traverse the continental United States and sit over military bases that are key to our, defensive triad or defensive and offensive military triad that we have here. So that's where I stand there. I also think that, and I understand sometimes you got to parse out information a little bit at a time as you go forward, so you make sure we get it right. We live in a 24-hour news cycle. I know that being social media is second by second, minute by minute, and you really can't, meet those demands because when you go fast, you're going to get things wrong, and we don't want to create hysteria. But I think the lack of transparency and information coming out from the administration is allowing and fostering, conspiracy theories to go crazy about, aliens and invasion and whatnot. And, one thing we have to talk about, too, is, we've all seen the movie Wag the Dog, where, back in the early 2000s, where the administration wanted to make sure no one paid attention to one issue, so they created another issue. And, I think more needs to be discussed and more needs to be found out about that derailment of that huge train derailment in Ohio that right now is spewing toxic gas into the atmosphere around Ohio and creating acid rain for the rest of the country.
All right. I want to talk about that, and it's part of the notes I've added, but I want to get Eric's perspective on this now.
So I think we have to remember who China is. China is the number one challenge to the United States internationally. It's very important that the American-led world order remain intact, and the axis of Russia, China, Iran, to a lesser extent North Korea, they kind of march to their own drummer. But those three countries, there's revanchist regimes that want to unseat the United States as the world's leading superpower. And that's why it matters what the source of this balloon was. Frankly, if the prevailing winds blew a Canadian balloon over Montana, nobody would care. But it wasn't Canada, it was China. And one of two things happened. Either we were tracking this thing from the time it left China's airspace, or we were blind. Either way, that's a really terrible thing. We were either ill-equipped to deal with the challenges of the country, or we knew it was there and failed to act. I'm not sure which is worse. But what we do know is at some point the Biden administration admitted it knew it was over the Aleutian Islands. I'm not sure what they were worried about on the ground that they were going to hurt. Maybe an errant seal.
A cow.
Not in the Aleutian Islands. Oh. Maybe a seal, and they could always go underwater. But they chose not to blow it out of the sky, and they waited until, and had not this journalist looked up in the sky of Montana and seen it and started talking about it, the Biden administration may not have said anything about it at all. And that's also quite troubling, because what does that tell us? It tells us that the Biden administration doesn't want to take any action. They're afraid to confront the Chinese. Antony Blinken, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, had a trip planned to go to China to work on the American-Chinese relationship. It's obviously the world's most important relationship right now because it's between the two leading superpowers in the world, the leader of tyranny, the Chinese, and the leader of the free world, the United States. And the Biden administration was wedded to Blinken going until they were humiliated and embarrassed by not taking any action. So they allowed this thing to traverse, and just by happenstance, the prevailing winds just happened to blow this balloon over every American naval missile installation. It was just remarkable how the winds just constantly shifted to do that. So I really think the bigger issue and the broader issue is, what is the American relationship with China? And the Biden administration's initial reaction after we blew up the balloon was that the American-Chinese relationship has not changed. That's remarkable. The president's saying it has not changed. He said that Blinken wouldn't go on his trip. But how can our relationship not change? We really have to wonder whether or not this administration is ready, willing, or able to stand up to the Chinese threat. China wants to replace us as the world's military leader. It wants to replace the yuan for the dollar as the international currency. If that ever happens, then the American-led world order absolutely does come to an end. So we have to start rethinking our relationship with China and whether the one China policy makes sense, strategic ambiguity makes sense. But at a minimum, what we have to start doing is decoupling our economy from the Chinese economy. We're in a new Cold War with the Chinese. The Cold War with the Soviet Union was nothing compared to what we have here, for the simple reason that the Soviet Union had kind of a parallel economy. It was never fully integrated into the world's economy. China is fully integrated. And you think about it, some of the materials we need for our military, China's in the supply chain. Some of the things we need for our medicines, China is in the supply chain. How's that possible? We need to start decoupling. They want to send us toys? Fine, send us a Lego. But they can't be sending us strategic minerals or pharmaceuticals that we need to function as a society. And Taiwan is going to be the flashpoint. And I think it's time to start rethinking the one China policy. We must keep in mind that there's two pieces to the one China policy. One is that the United States will recognize only one China, But the other piece is that from the Chinese perspective, there will only be reunification of China and Taiwan peacefully. China's breached that. They've been flying over Taiwan airspace. They've been sending their ships into Taiwan water. Taiwan has its own government. It's a democracy. It makes these microchips that are critical to the United States and the West. And we really need to be prepared to defend Taiwan. And I think the time of strategic ambiguity has to be rethought, and America has to be prepared to stand up and say, we will defend Taiwan, because it's bigger than Taiwan. Now, Joe Biden has said that a few times, but within 30 seconds of saying it, his team walks it back, and then he says, oh, yeah, there's no change in policy. So incoherence seems to be the Biden foreign policy.
Well, there's a very interesting column that just came out from the leading China expert, Gordon Chang, and he said as follows: you have to look very, very carefully about what's going on in China and what their agenda is. Is this a fight between the civilians and the Communist Party, or between the Chinese military for control of policy? Was this balloon sent out without the civilians knowing about it, or was there a green light from the Communist Party officials and from Xi? That's a very important question. We don't know the answer to that, but that, in a way, will shape how we respond, because we keep thinking of Xi being the enemy, but if in fact he is and I hate to use the word moderate, but if he's the more moderate as against the Chinese military, then the problem seems to me that's worsened. Second thing that Gordon Chang said, and I thought was very insightful, is as follows: is this merely an intelligence gathering gambit using this balloon, or was this a step in a military attack, and they were trying to see where we were weak and what we could respond and how they could take us out in terms of going over those bases? In other words, was this the opening gambit of what may well be either a first strike or a second strike by the Chinese against the United States? And we don't know the answer to that. But that's why, as you, Jesse, and Eric have pointed out, this is such an important situation that has to be confronted in an intelligent, rational way. I'm not confident in the following. I'm not confident in our intelligence capabilities and understanding these issues. I'm not confident in the military's ability to respond effectively and forcefully in protecting us, and what they knew and when they know it and how they could respond or not respond. And least of all, am I confident that we're going to gain truth from this administration. Jesse, what say you?
I think you're spot on. I think the issue is here, and we're seeing it on a multi-level thing. We know that China and Russia have been engaging in these massive, or will be just shortly massive, war games and such, military exercises. Now we have, on top of the balloon issue, like I said, I don't believe in coincidences. Like Eric pointed out, I doubt very much that the wind patterns just happened to blow that surveillance balloon over military installations. I mean, they just happened to do it that way. I don't believe in coincidences when it comes to issues like that. I don't think anybody else does. And if they're believing that in the Pentagon, it just demonstrates we need a new leadership in the Pentagon. If you see first the balloon issues, then over this past weekend, about a week ago, we had three balloons or items or objects that needed to be shot down by the military between Canada and the United States. And then just later in the week, we had to have NORAD escort a Russian bomber out of Alaskan airspace. It is clear, at least clear to me, to a layman like this, that these are all well thought out, pre-planned, comprehensive tests of our military reactions and the reactions of our political leaders in Washington to see how far they go. As we've always said, Your Honor, and I think Eric agrees with us, the one person in this country, this world, the one entity that benefited by the Ukraine-Russian war was China. They watched and sat back and watched the response of Russia, the Ukraine, and the Western alliances to defend that. And they learned. They continuously learn to how to beat us and how to test us. And I really do think that we need the days of Teddy Roosevelt where we carry a big stick. We seek, as Ronald Reagan says, peace through strength. We need to project that strength because it's the only way that's going to keep these warmongers or the Chinese government that wants to take over the world and replace the United States as the dominant superpower economically, socially, and militarily in the world order. We need to demonstrate our strength, our resolve to protect our airspace and protect navigational waters so that trade can continue.
All right. Kevin has given us that sign. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Eric Levine, distinguished lawyer, political commentator, essayist, and Jesse Garcia, a good friend, esteemed colleague, the vice chair of the state Republican Party and the county chair of the Republican Party out in Suffolk County. We're going to be taking a break. Stay tuned for more interesting conversation on the Long Island Report. We'll be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and esteemed lawyer and political commentator and essayist Eric Levine. When we left off, Eric had an interesting point he wanted to make about our military and our military capacity and strength. Eric.
So just picking up on something Jesse was saying regarding peace through strength. The best way, of course, to not fight a war is for people to be afraid of the United States and that there's a credible threat that if you were to engage us in a war, you would lose, and you lose overwhelmingly. The old Reagan slogan of peace through strength. We're at an interesting point now. I think it's very clear that the United States is not capable, the American military is not ready to meet all the threats that confront it. And now we have to put that into perspective of the debt ceiling discussion and how are we going to bring our fiscal house in order. Now, we know on the left, amongst the progressives, their view of the world is that the United States is evil and the American military spreads evil throughout the world. Therefore, we must withdraw from the world, bring the troops home. On the isolationist right in the Republican Party, led by Rand Paul, you hear this from Tucker Carlson, somewhat from J.D. Vance, their view is America is so wonderful and pure, and the world is not worthy of our largesse, and what goes on over there doesn't impact us here. Let's bring everybody home. So they may start from a different point, but they end up in the same place. America withdraws. And when America withdraws, bad things fill the vacuum. Look what happened when we left Iraq too early. ISIS filled the vacuum. Look what happened when we surrendered catastrophically in Afghanistan. The Taliban has filled the vacuum. The Chinese are now in the Bagram Air Force Base. Bad things happen. The Iranians are flying drones over American bases in Syria. Bad things happen when we leave. So in order for the United States to continue to lead the American-led world order, we must beef up our military. And I'm very concerned that either as the part of the debt ceiling conversation or whether when the budget discussion as we get later on in the year, that the progressive left is going to make a deal with the isolationist right in the Republican Party to cut defense spending, and that would be a tragedy.
Jesse.
Absolutely. If you're going to engage in peace through strength, that means we need an overwhelming military. We need to provide our men and women of uniform the resources. We need to make sure that they're properly armed, properly provided the logistics. This is no time for petty politics internally, whether it's in the Democratic Party or the Republican majority, for that to be into place. The needs of this country need to go first and foremost. That is the oath they took, the protection of this country and its citizenry. So I agree with you, Eric, and you're right. We need to beef up our military. We heard, Judge Weinberg and I think, Eric, you probably heard it too. We heard from Speaker McCarthy, how the Chinese now have missiles that will drop down into aircraft carriers so that they can eliminate one of the greatest military forces we have, military arms of our military triad to hold us back. That's why we need to continue to innovate. We need to continue to expand. We need to continue to grow. We need to make sure that we keep up with technology, and if not, exceed it and dictate the pace of it so that we can be prepared for any eventuality. We have to go back to being able to fight, 2.5 wars or 2.5 confrontations at the same time with overwhelming force. That's what the doctrine's been. Maybe that was it when I was growing up during the Cold War, and maybe that's changed, but let the generals who truly have the minds to protect this country and know whether new wars are being fought dictate where we have to go with that. Let's not let politics and backbenchers who are looking for sound bites for the purposes of advancing their own ego and their own personal situations and the political spectrum, dictate how that's going.
Well, I started our discussion today, gentlemen, by saying that my theme is that there are clear and present dangers facing this country. And we've talked about this before, the three of us, about this axis of evil of Russia and of China, of Iran. North Korea is a player, a collateral player. It's not the big three. And don't forget Venezuela, because Venezuela is a beachhead for Chinese or Russian influence in Latin America. So much for the Monroe Doctrine and protecting us. We almost went to a nuclear war because of missiles in Cuba. So why are we allowing them to buy up land in Venezuela and allowing the Venezuelan dictatorship to play footsie with the Chinese and with the Russians? That's a very, very dangerous thing. But I want to focus for a few moments and get the opinions of both of you. I believe that the biggest threat, and I think it was said today by both of you, the biggest threat is China, by far. And let me just give you an enumeration, a listing of what they've done and why we have to take this seriously. And then you, gentlemen, can comment. They've infiltrated our universities. The University of Pennsylvania Biden Center is a perfect example of their money running into the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League, very prestigious school. But that's only one university. They steal our technology. They steal our intellectual property. They've invested in media, TikTok. They've had investment in all kinds of companies, which influences the direction of companies in terms of doing business and buying their silence. They've made these Belt and Road investments worldwide to build up strategic relationships and undermine us. They have a strategic plan overall for world domination. They haven't been shy about talking about it. It's out there. They've been buying land in the United States near military installations and also near farmland. Neither one is a good thing to have China control your farmland and take our farmland out of production or have it near military installations. They have a monopoly power over strategic natural resources that you need for batteries. They have a domination on pharmaceuticals. We're dependent on them for pharmaceuticals. They have played this game with the cartels and given them the mixes and requirements to build fentanyl, and these cartels then shipping into the United States, which is an act of war against the United States. All that is going on, and none of it, to use Jesse's term of art, none of this is a coincidence. So I'm not a warmonger. I'm not an armchair general. I don't want to go to war. But when Obama said to Romney in a debate, the Cold War era is over, boy, did he have it wrong. And maybe, and you can't say that Russia's been quiet and they haven't resuscitated the Cold War. But the real Cold War, as Eric is pointed out, the real Cold War, the hotter Cold War, the most dangerous Cold War that we have faced in my lifetime is this Cold War with China. Eric, say you. So
you make an interesting point about Obama. The other thing he said when he was asked about American exceptionalism, I'm trying to make the quote as close as possible, but this is what he said. Do you believe in American exceptionalism? And his answer was, of course I do, just like England believes in English exceptionalism and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism. That completely misses the point about what American exceptionalism means. It means America is the indispensable party, that without us, the Western Alliance, freedoms and liberties, free trade, have no chance. The United States must lead. So when he makes the statement that there really is no such thing as American exceptionalism, what he is saying is that it's time to end the American-led world order. And it's from that point forward that we start seeing cuts in the military budget. You start seeing the Chinese becoming more aggressive. You start seeing the Iranians becoming more aggressive. Of course, that's a direct result of the Obama JCPOA and wanting to give Iran a nuclear weapon. Don't buy into the nonsense that it was to stop a nuclear weapon. It was to shift the Middle East power base from the American-Israeli alliance to an Iranian-dominated region. But putting that aside, so now that we see that Obama views the United States as just generally another kind of country, what do we start seeing taking its place? All these international arrangements, the Paris Climate Accords. What is the Paris Climate Accords supposed to accomplish? John Kerry himself, the great climate guru, has admitted that even if every country met its obligations under the Paris Climate Accords, it would have no impact on climate. So why are we doing it? It just weakens the United States, both at home and abroad. But it's a step towards socialism. It's a step towards the government taking over the energy sector. That's really what that's about. So you have the International Court of Criminal Court. Obama was on the fence about whether or not to join. Ultimately, he was overruled on that. But it's all this soft power. It's all this shift from an American-led world order to this great world type of government. And that's what Obama would refer to as kind of smart power. Smart power is really stupid because it weakens the United States. So there's no substitute for raw power, for real power. That's how you keep the peace. We must get back to the point where we believe in American exceptionalism, that the United States is the indispensable party, and that only we can keep the peace.
Jesse.
I think I can't say that. Number one, I completely believe that there is American exceptionalism. I believe that in every fiber of my being, and I can say that through just a personal account. My father, who lived and grew up, was born in Cuba, sought freedom and liberty just 90 miles away when Castro was taking over, and he saw what Castro was doing. He defected to this country because he wanted to raise a family and grow in an economy, in a place where freedom rang true. That is just a personal situation which I've seen firsthand. But I see it in everyday lives. And we cannot shake away from that. It's important that America does not lose its place of leading the world because of everything that Eric said. Every good thing that comes out of a result of peace, out of prosperity, out of unity in this country, in this globe, comes from the American participation and American leading that effort. We cannot secede. We cannot give up or recede any of that positioning, because it's America that will suffer. We will be surrounded, but it's the globe. It's our partners everywhere else that will suffer. We need to maintain that, and I think that it's right. The way Obama did, he did what he normally did. He deflected away from the question, because there is American exceptionalism, and we need to maintain that. We need to back that up with the resources and the fundamental thought process of our principles to lead in that direction.
Well, that's well said. I'll tell you this. I'll shift gears now. I think, once again, and you don't hear too much about it, but they're still working on it, this administration, through Kerry and other people, Susan Rice, Valerie Jarrett, have carried on the Obama agenda. They've done that. It really is, in a very real sense, this is Obama's third term, with all its collateral and awful consequences. And one of the things they've been working on, sub rosa, behind the scenes, is resurrecting the Iran deal. They keep saying it's dead in the water, except every once in a while it dribbles out that they're actually still talking and they're still working on a deal with Iran. So what happened when they did the first deal with Iran? Did they get an absolute guarantee that Iran would never have nuclear weapons? Absolutely not. All they did is delay their movement towards nuclear weapons. Did they get a control and a limitation or a rejection of Iran funding terrorism throughout the Middle East? No. They funded it all over, and they have influence in, 5 or 6 different countries with Iran weaponry that's being shipped around on intelligence operations and monies. And if you have any doubt that Iran is a player and has misused the money that Biden is okay giving them, just like Obama was okay giving them, look at who they're supporting. They're supporting the Russians with respect to the Ukrainian invasion by Russia. A lot of weaponry and funding and buying of oil and selling of oil and the deals is between Russia and Iran. And China is involved with Iran as well. You have a visit going on right now between the Iranian president and China. So this argument that, the Cold War is over, no, it's a very dangerous Cold War, and this axis of evil are tighter than ever before in our lifetime. And this is serious stuff. And yet they keep pushing for a deal. And Kerry, in the most foolish statement of all, when the Iran deal, they said, this was, in essence, peace in our time. It's not peace in our time at all. And when Ukraine was invaded, he said, well, I hope this doesn't upset any kind of agreements we have with respect to climate change. I mean, this man has a focus that is totally misdirected. That this man was a Secretary of State of the United States and a presidential candidate makes my eyes bleed and my head explode. It's absolutely awful, the lack of intelligence, focus, and concern for our country. Eric.
So just coming back to the Iranian drone, first let me make this point. Under the JCPOA, the original deal, in 2030, all restrictions on nuclear enrichment ended. So Iran was guaranteed a legal path to a nuclear weapon. But just to your point about the Iranian drones. The Iranian drones aren't just being sold to the Russians to attack Ukraine. The Iranian drones are being given to Iran's terrorist proxies in Syria to attack American troops. And we do nothing. We do nothing about it. The simplest thing to do is a couple of cruise missiles out of a submarine somewhere in some ocean somewhere to take out some of these drone factories. If you won't do it for the Ukraine, do it for American soldiers that we've sent into harm's way.
All right. Kevin has given us the sign. We'll take a break. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and esteemed political commentator and attorney Eric Levine. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and esteemed attorney and political commentator Eric Levine. Well, the theme of today's show was the clear and present dangers facing the United States, and we were talking about the external threats. Now I want to shift gears. I want to start talking about internal threats, gentlemen. The big picture, it seems to me, is that we're a divided country, and we can talk about being a divided country and how awful that is, because without a unity, you can't get a consensus about what to do. And if you have all these external threats, then we can't get united. You can't get united. Then the short answer is we're never going to be able to meet the external threats. And I want to start off with something, and I don't believe in coincidence, to use the framework that Jesse has used today. I don't believe in coincidence. So let's talk about sabotage. There's sabotage going on right now in the United States. There's sabotage of our food supply, numerous occasions. There's sabotage of our water. There's sabotage of our energy, and there's sabotage of our trains. I don't believe in coincidence. Too many times on each of those elements, transportation, energy, water, food, all essential requirements for civilization and for keeping this country going. And there's this fire in Ohio going on, this train derailment. It's one of many train derailments. And where, by the way, is the young Mr. Transportation Secretary? He's talking about...
He's on paternity leave.
Well, no, he's off paternity leave, and he's talking about that you have too many white construction workers. You'd think that somebody who cared about this country and the threats to this country would do as follows. He would get on a plane and go to Ohio and see what the United States government can do to protect the poor people of Ohio. Their water is now going to be polluted. Their air is polluted. It's an endangered area. What are they doing to protect that? And there's no focus on this sabotage, and don't believe in coincidence. Eric, your turn.
Well, what's interesting, I saw a press conference with Governor DeWine from Ohio, and I was shocked to hear that he was saying that the train that supposedly when a train that has toxic materials traverses a state, that the state is supposed to be warned by the government. I'm not sure which agency, but it's supposed to be warned by the federal government that train has toxic materials on it, so they can take the appropriate precautions. Ohio was not told that. They were operating from the premise it was just delivering toys, whatever it was. Yeah, so
that's absolutely shocking.
So Ohio had absolutely no idea until after it all started spewing into the air. You know, on your point about sabotage, we know for certain that there's cyber attacks going on, and Russia has been leading them. And during the Biden years, they've acknowledged that they've attacked our grid and they've attacked certain parts of the economy. And the Biden response is, don't attack this stuff, attack that stuff. And we have, which of course is an insane response. The response has to be, cut it out, period, or you're going to pay the piper. And we have no idea if this administration has responded at all. They just fall behind, this is all secret. We can't really share it with you. The American people need to know what threats they are being faced with and how we plan on responding to them. And what's consistent, whether it's the balloons over Montana, whether it's cyber attacks, whether it's a train derailment, this administration is not being candid with the American people about the threats they are facing, and we are certainly not being told about what this administration plans on doing about it.
Jesse.
I think that the biggest problem, as you both have pointed out, the government, the state government was never alerted to some material of this train that was derailed in Ohio, and now it's spewing toxic material, hazardous material all over the place, and the population is in trouble. And I think that's the problem with this administration. Either they're asleep at the switch, or they're basically, negligent, or they're just not up to the task. Whether it's the transportation secretary, whether it's the senior officials in the White House, or the president and the vice president themselves. When you talk about sabotage, and Eric pointed this out, I am always curious, and I always hope that this is not the case, but we've seen these foreign actors, China, Russia specifically, even those from the Middle East and Iran, they will secure, somehow, pay off, buy, get into the lives of, some of the more, some of our population and brainwash them into a way of saying, listen, there's a better way of doing it, and turning them into, members of the community that are going to sabotage our nation. We have to be far more diligent. And I think that the problem here is that there's a disconnect. First and foremost, it almost seems like there's a disconnect between the federal government, our state governments, and localities. This would have, the state of Ohio would have been prepared for an eventuality, possibly, maybe a little bit better if they just knew what was going on there. And I don't understand why that didn't happen. The cyber attacks that keep coming on, the attacks are letting our farms being purchased, as we've discussed, and Judge, you discussed earlier, by foreign powers that are enemies of us here in America, is just I can't fathom what is going on in the minds or in the offices of the White House that they were allowed to do this. I mean, listen, you guys are far more intelligent than me. You know more of the internal workings of the federal government, but there are tools in place. There are ways in which we can protect domestically those foreign attacks upon us and them embedding themselves in our country. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing an embed. It used to be terrorists. Now it's state-sanctioned terrorists, whether it be China, Russia, or otherwise.
Eric.
So, Richard, you made the point about Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg. There's no substitute for competence. Can anyone name a single cabinet member
Who's
that's
competent? No, I can't.
You just can't. Whether it's Mayorkas at the border, head of HHS, I've drawn a blank on his name. Regardless.
The former Attorney General and Congressman from California.
Yes.
Right. He's an easy guy to draw a blank on because he's an empty suit as a congressman.
Right.
Okay. And now is Attorney General of California, except by pushing left-wing agenda.
Right.
And now he's a secretary of something he knows nothing about.
Right. Anthony Blinken is Secretary of State. There's not a single Granholm for energy. There is not a single competent person in this administration. I mean, I guess the poster child for this is Kamala Harris. She's probably the most incompetent. She's not a cabinet member. She's the vice president. God forbid something happens to Joe Biden. I mean, that'll just tell you that God forbid something happens to Joe Biden. We're ending up with Kamala Harris. Who knows where the country ends up then?
Well, Kevin has given me the signal. We're going to take a break. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and esteemed political commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. We're going to be back for our fourth and final segment. Stay tuned for more interesting conversation.